This nurse from 1945 has discovered a mysterious ancient stone structure, but unbeknownst to her, it is actually a time portal. 6 months after the end of World War II, a woman named Claire Randall gazes longingly at a vase through a shop window, realizing she's never settled in a single place long enough to buy something as simple as a vase. A flashback reveals that Claire served as a nurse during the war and witnessed horrific tragedies. In the present, Claire and her husband Frank Randall take a vacation to Scotland after being apart for 5 years due to the war. They are taking the vacation to celebrate the end of the war, but Claire's inner monologue reveals that they are really trying to see whether they are still the same people they were 5 years ago. The couple arrives in town and notices that there is blood smeared on the front door of every building. Frank, who is a historian, points out that Scottish culture is full of pagan rituals, and this is probably just one example of that. The receptionist at their hotel tells them that the blood on the doors is part of a sacrificial ritual to honor Saint Odhran. She reveals that it is almost time for the Samhain festival, which is the Scottish equivalent of Halloween. She warns the couple that ghosts are freed during this time, and they roam the streets doing good or ill deeds as they please. They laugh it off. The couple arrives in their room, and Claire begins a game of jumping on the bed, which the receptionist misconstrues as a very different act. Claire and Frank proceed to perform that act as well. Next, the two drive through the countryside, and Frank tells Clary all about the 17th and 18th century history of the area, when the Scottish rebels fought the British Army. Claire is used to indulging in history, as she was raised by her uncle after her parents died, and he was an archaeologist. The two arrive at the ruins of an old castle, and it is revealed that Frank is actually there to research his own lineage, in particular, his 18th century ancestor, Jonathan Blackjack Randall, who was a captain in the British Army. As the two explore the ruins, Claire starts feeling kinky, and Frank gives her, what can only be assumed to be, some historical head. The two arrive at a church, where Frank finds proof that his ancestor Jonathan was stationed in this area. It is revealed that he was a disliked figure, as he was popularly known for harassing the Scottish countryside for the crown. Claire has tea with the churchmaid, Mrs. Graham, and she reveals that her mother taught her to read tea leaves. As Mrs. Graham reads the leaves in Claire's cup, she appears confused. She says that everything in the cup is contradictory. The leaves show that Claire will go on a journey, but also that she will stay put, which makes no sense. Furthermore, Claire will be surrounded by strangers on the journey, but one of them will be her husband. Mrs. Graham asks to read her palm, and Claire agrees. Once again, she is confused. She says that she has never seen the kind of patterns that are present in Claire's palm. She also points out that Claire's marriage line is divided, which means she is going to have 2 marriages. Mrs. Graham has a very grave look on her face the entire time she reads Claire's palm. Claire returns to her hotel room, while Frank continues to go through the records of his ancestor. Later at night, as Frank is walking back to the hotel, he notices a man standing in the street and gazing at their hotel room window, where Claire is brushing her hair. He approaches the man to confront him, but the man turns around and disappears into thin air, while simultaneously, the power goes out across the town. Frank freaks out ever so slightly. He comes inside and tells Claire about the incident, and she doesn't know what to make of it either. Frank theorizes that perhaps the man in the street was some Scottishman whom Claire treated during the war, trying to reconnect. Claire angrily asks if Frank is accusing her of being unfaithful, and Frank immediately apologizes. She forgives him and proceeds to kiss him and undress, revealing her historical melons. After making love, Frank says that he wants to go and observe a pagan ritual performed by some druids at a circle of standing stones on the hill of Craigna-Dun just before sunrise. Frank and Claire arrive at the hill and they see the city lights down below. They hide in some bushes to observe the ritual from a distance. As the druids arrive, Claire notices that Mrs. Graham is among them. While witnessing the beautiful ritual, Clary suddenly gets a strong feeling that she should not be there. She should not be witnessing this ancient power. After the ritual is over, Claire and Frank climb up the hill to observe the giant stones, and Claire, who has an interest in botany for medical purposes, observes some curious-looking flowers. One of the druids returns to collect something she left behind, and Clary and Frank are forced to leave. At home, Claire looks for the flowers she saw in her botany books. Frank advises her to go back and collect a sample. Claire drives back up the hill and proceeds to collect the sample, but as she is doing so, she hears strange sounds coming out of the center stone. She feels oddly drawn to the stone and touches it, but as she does, she is knocked out. Next, Claire wakes up still in the same place. Scared by what just happened, she decides to rush back to the hotel, but she finds that her car, along with the road and the rest of the landscape, is missing. All she sees for miles in every direction is wilderness, and she is thoroughly confused. As Claire traverses through the wilderness, trying to find a way home, she hears a loud gunshot. She turns around to see 18th-century British soldiers running through the woods, and one of them spots her and shoots at her. Claire makes a run for it as the soldiers follow her, and she ends up coming face-to-face with a man who looks exactly like Frank, but is dressed in 18th-century clothing as well. Claire refers to him as Frank, but he doesn't respond to that name. He reveals that his name is Jonathan Randall, and Claire suddenly realizes what has happened. Somehow she has time-traveled back to the 18th century. Remembering Jonathan's reputation, Claire makes a run for it, but Jonathan corners her. He demands to know her name, and Claire says that her name is Claire Beauchamp, to avoid the confusion of telling him that she is a Randall as well. He demands to know what she is doing here, and when she resists, he tries to force himself on her. Just then, a mysterious man arrives and knocks Jonathan out. The man tries to hide Claire from the other British soldiers, but when she makes too much noise, he knocks her out. When Claire wakes up, she is on a horse. The man brings her to a house in the middle of nowhere, full of Scottish rebels. The leader of the group, Dougal, inspects Claire and prohibits his men from forcing themselves on her when they suggest such a thing. He says that they will deal with Claire later, as right now they have to get moving. One of the rebels, Jamie Fraser, has dislocated his shoulder. When the other soldiers are about to try and pop it back into place, Claire stops them and tells them that they are doing it wrong, risking breaking Jamie's arm. She pops his shoulder back into place properly and prescribes him a week-long regimen to nurse it back to health. The rebels are impressed. As the rebels prepare to ride into the night, Clary stares into the distance, hoping to see the city like she did before, but to no avail. When she asks Jamie where the city is, he tells her that she's looking right at it, and Claire realizes that she was looking for electric lights, which don't exist at this time. She gets on a horse with Jamie, and they start riding. After riding for a long time, they arrive at a mountain. Claire remembers Frank telling her that the British used this mountain to ambush the Scottish rebels, and she warns them. They are curious as to how she can possibly know this, but as they move forward and encounter the British, she is proven right. Claire escapes during the ambush, but after a while, Jamie finds her again. Claire reluctantly agrees to rejoin the rebels. While riding at night, Jamie falls off his horse, and Claire discovers that he has a gunshot wound from the ambush and has lost a lot of blood. She cleans his wound with alcohol that she gets from the rebels and bandages it by tearing off a piece of her dress. Jamie regains consciousness and thanks her. Finally, in the morning, they arrive at their destination, which is revealed to be the same castle that Claire visited a couple of days ago and 200 years in the future, with Frank. At the castle, Claire meets Mrs. Fitzgibbons, or Fitz, and she explains to her that Jamie's wound needs tending. Mrs. Fitz brings Claire all the herbs that she asks for to clean Jamie's wound. As she is cleaning the wound, she notices terrible marks on Jamie's back, and he reveals that he was flogged, nearly to death, by Jonathan Randall twice, once for trying to escape prison and once for a different charge. Claire inquires why he was imprisoned in the first place, and Jamie reveals that Jonathan and the British Army don't really bother with proper charges. A flashback shows Jonathan and his platoon coming to collect taxes from landowners, and as they arrive at Jamie's home, he hears screaming in the distance. He rushes to the scene to find his sister being harassed by 2 British soldiers. He beats the soldiers up and tells his sister to run, but she is captured by Jonathan. Jonathan has his men hold Jamie, while he sexually assaults his sister. Next, Jonathan flogs Jamie and gives his sister the choice between watching him die and sleeping with Jonathan. She picks the latter. Claire is distraught to hear this story. Jamie thanks her for taking care of him, and adds that her husband is a lucky man. Claire starts crying at the mention of her husband, and Jamie comforts her. She lies to him that her husband is dead. Jamie assures her that she is safe at this castle as long as he is around, but still reminds her that she is English, and that is not a welcome trait at this place. Next, Mrs. Fitz wakes Claire up and provides her with appropriate dressing before she goes to meet the laird of the castle, Colum Ban Campbell Mackenzie. As Claire arrives in Colum's study, she reads a letter he is writing and learns that she is precisely in November 1743. Colum arrives and welcomes Clary to the castle. He asks her about how she ended up wandering in the woods all by herself, and she invents a story that she was on her way to visit her relatives in France when she was attacked by some highwaymen, and that's how she ended up running through the woods and encountering Captain Jonathan, whom one of the rebels saved her from. She confidently requests transport back to the city, and Colum tells her that a traveler will be passing through here toward the city in 5 days, and she can hitch a ride with him. Next, Claire arrives for dinner with the Mackenzies, and throughout the meal, Colum asks her questions, trying to get details about her travel plans and her supposed family in France. It is clear that he does not believe her story, and he is trying to poke holes in it. After he manages to catch her off guard a couple of times, Claire says that she is tired from all the traveling and needs to head to bed early. Next, Claire arrives to meet Jamie again and change his bandages. Afterward, the two share a meal, and Jamie reveals that he killed a British soldier when he was escaping from prison, and he has a reward on his head. He is living at the castle under a fake last name to avoid being captured, and very few people know this. She asks why he's telling her all this, and he says that he trusts her. As Claire is leaving the stables where Jamie works, she learns that Dougal is having her followed. She meets up with Dougal and asks what suspicions he has about her, and he replies that he suspects her to be an English spy. Claire angrily says that he can have her followed all he wants, but he won't find her doing anything interesting over the next 4 days. Dougal is surprised at this comment, as he was not aware that Claire is bound to leave this castle soon. Next, Claire heads out to collect food items for Mrs. Fitz, and she meets a woman named Gellis. She reveals that she knows quite a bit about herbs and potions like Claire, and the village people call her a witch. She also reveals that the entire village is gossiping about Claire at the moment, and they all believe that she is a spy. Later at night, Gellis joins Claire as they attend the court held by Colum to solve the disputes of the village people. During the hearings, one man brings his daughter in and accuses her of lewd behavior, asking Colum to punish her. Colum orders the punishment, but Jamie steps in and offers to take the punishment on behalf of the girl. The punishment begins, and Jamie seems to enjoy it, but then Dougal strangely orders the man carrying out the punishment to attack Jamie's injured shoulder, which causes him significant pain. Claire can't believe the barbaric customs of this time. After the punishment, Claire tends to Jamie's injuries and asks why he took the girl's punishment. He reveals that for him the wounds are just physical and they will heal, but being punished in front of the entire hall would haunt that girl for a long time. Claire tells Jamie that she will be leaving tomorrow, and the two say their goodbyes. The next morning, as Claire is about to leave, Dougal tells her that Colum wants to see her. He takes her down to the dungeon, and Claire remembers that this is the place where she will get some historical head 200 years from now. Colum tells Claire that they used to have a healer like her, and this was his workshop until he died. He informs her that they need a healer at the castle, and offers her the position. Claire refuses the offer and insists that she must get going, but then Colum reveals that it is not an offer. She will stay. Claire demands to know why he is trying to hold her prisoner, and Colum says that he knows she has secrets. He just doesn't know what they are, and until he can figure it out, she will be staying. Colum and Dougal leave, locking a crying Claire in the dungeon all by herself. Outlander is a historical TV series which is based on a novel series of the same name. The show first aired in 2014 and has run for 7 seasons till 2023, with its 8th and final season expected to air in 2024. The show has been hugely popular with critics and audiences alike, receiving growing praise with each subsequent season. In particular, the show has been praised for its beautiful visuals and the performance and chemistry of the lead actors, which cultivates romance and intrigue perfectly. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.